special meeting of the Clark County Board of Education. I'd like to welcome everyone who is here, and let's go ahead and stand and observe a moment of silence. Now I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the motion is in order to adopt the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Harrido,
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Heisel. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
No.
carries. All right, motion carries 4-1. With Mr. Harrido, Mr. Heisel, Dr. Kudak, and Ms. Ritchie in favor, and Ms. Hicks opposed. All right, next up on the public comments is Ms. Hicks, item number 2.
Thank you. Sorry. No. I wish to address the board about item number 2. Again, we arrive at a board meeting receiving or having received revised, updated information on the same day as our meeting without having adequate time to review it. But yet we're going to be making critical decisions that will impact our district for years and years. That's why I voted no on adopting the agenda. You know, I think sometimes certain things cannot be avoided by last minute. But, you know, when I'm working through something and doing calculations, then I come up on the document that's not complete, I have difficulty with that. In May of 2017, this board voted 5-0 on a recommended salary schedule that incorporated a new salary structure on which we all agreed. We wanted to recognize and reward years of experience individually rather than in those 3 to 5 year bands of service after 9 years of experience. We agreed 5-0 to do that. We agreed that our classified salaries need to be improved, and we took steps that we needed to do that. We discussed the significant disparity that's created when across-the-board percentage increases are used in the salary structure. The difference between the impact of a 2% or any other percentage increase on a $10 or $12 an hour hourly classified worker compared to that same 2% increase on an employee who makes an $80,000 a year salary. We voted, yes, I repeat, 5-0 to implement that different structure. When we look at this salary schedule, it's indicating a 2% across the board. When I did calculations based on the 2016-2017 schedule last year, and the one we started with last year, and I know there were some increases later, the new salaries proposed on not the most updated schedule, but the one that we received earlier, has salary increases of from 5% to 7.6%. I'm not convinced that our budget can afford that. Yes, I know we've done very well. We have some leftover money, but this is a recurring expense. It's not just this year. It's all years in the past. And I might understand better if we had not agreed back in May that we wanted to go with a different type of salary structure, and we did that. But I guess I'm just asking, here we are again, ignoring the unanimity that this board showed in May. And we're proposing to go back to an across-the-board percentage that, in my opinion, will continue to create the significant disparity that we have tried to avoid and make some effort at fixing. So I ask, why?
Next up, under Student Support Services, it's item number 2, consider discussion and approval of salary increase to FY 2018 salary tables. Ms. Hallis. I'm going to set a time limit of 60 minutes for discussion, for your presentation and discussion of this item.
6-0.
6-0. So at 7:10, I will call a vote, and I will ask for a motion, and debate will cease at that point.
All right, I just want to first thank you all for calling this meeting. It is extremely important to the staff of Clark County that this be considered, and for our finance and payroll department, as the calculations are a bit cumbersome to switch salary tables in the middle of the year, and we would like to get that done for our staff prior to paying the entire district on August 30th, which is the kind of speedy hurry of getting this meeting together. I just wanted to first start by that you were given a PowerPoint, kind of a review of how we ended the year. When I stood before you at the board meeting last month, I was still working on trying to finish up our financial statements for the end of the year and get them submitted to KDE by the 25th. That has now been done, so these are the numbers that have been submitted for our unaudited AFR, and I just kind of wanted to review those with you all to show you where we stand at the moment. So this first slide is a review of our actual revenues collected against what we had budgeted for the FY17 year. And we ended the year collecting approximately $797,000 more. I backed out on behalf payments, which were $486,000. So we actually collected in revenues $763,000 over what we had budgeted. Because on behalfs, again, are kind of a wash between revenues and expenses, so that's why I backed those out.
Ma'am, can I ask you a clarifying
Yes,
question?
sir.
The fund transfers, was that budgeted, or should that also be backed out?
When we do the entries for it, we set up the budget and set up the entry at the same time, so it makes it even. So we make a transfer and we decrease the budget it came from, increase the budget it goes to, and then we also do a journal entry that records that at the same time, so it zeroes out the bottom of the budget versus the actual expenditure, saying that we spent the entire budget that was given for that. Does that answer your question? So flipping to the next slide on expenses, same thing. I listed out by function our actual expenses versus our budget. And as you can see, we ended with $13.8 million. $11.8 million of that was the contingency budget, so I've backed that out, showing that we actually ended the year against our budget $2 million. And the next slide actually breaks out what that $2 million is made up of. In the past, we've been a little fuzzy on how we're ending the year with so much money, but we've been able to pinpoint exactly what made up this $2 million this year. We did capital funds requests from our capital outlay account and building fund, because that is permissible per KDE, that you can move funds back to your general fund for certain expenditures. And so we did that for technology and maintenance expenses. So that was the $1.1 million in the funds transfer that we referred to just a few minutes ago. And then also workers' comp had been over budgeted for the year versus what we had actually spent by about $350,000. And then between the allocations that the schools were given, plus the additional funds that the board had allotted through the year to the schools, they had $181,000 left over that the board agreed that they would be allowed to carry forward into this fiscal year. And so that's another little chunk of money that we truly, when you look at what all of those, that $2 million is made up of, we have bottom dollar, that $348 that was just kind of left over in expenses not spent throughout the different categories. So, any questions there? Are we good?
And this is recurring revenue, not one-time revenue.
Correct.
I'm confused with that. How could that be described as recurring revenue?
When it's described as recurring because we budgeted at the beginning of the year approximately $45 million in recurring revenue, and what was spent, that 46 4.4. 4.3 of that is actually one-time expenditures, which is the contingency dollars that you all moved from contingency into the budget to spend, because you have to move it out of contingency. You cannot spend in the contingency account. It has to be moved out of that account into a proper expenditure account. So $4.3 million was moved into an expenditure account, and those were one-time expenditures. So when you look at your total expenditures for the year, the $46.4 million, take out your $4.3 million, you're left with $42 million of reoccurring expenditures on a budget that was 45 recurring dollars. So the difference would be recurring dollars.
How long does it recur?
That money is, when it's recurring dollars, it's money that's the same. When you keep your tax rate, that is going forward, you will always get that money in every year. So that's why it's called recurring dollars. So unless you go backwards on your tax rate, you're always going to create those recurring dollars unless you have a drastic property assessment and seek change. That's why it's considered recurring, because you'll get those every year based on that tax rate that was set by the district.
If SEEK is not fully funded, is that money in jeopardy?
It does make, that's part of your recurring dollars, so
Or if enrollment drops?
if the enrollment drops, yes, sir.
Well, with all due respect, I think I'm going to disagree on the classification of that as recurring, because I think it's apples and oranges. It's one fiscal year compared to another fiscal year, and fiscal 17-18 is radically different than the prior year. I will agree, it's one-time money that's carried forward, but I don't think we can necessarily imply that it'll be available next year.
That is your prerogative to say that. The next slide shows the additional revenue that was collected on the budget, actuals versus budget, and also the expenses, which is showing our ending balance of that 14.6 million is how that number was arrived at. And essentially that's our carry forward number minus any audit adjustments that might come with the audit.
So on the additional revenue collected,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, in the first slide, does that include the on behalf?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The expenses also includes the on behalf, so that's why I left it at the full
Okay.
797, because it's then taken out on the expense side
Okay.
as well. So it
Thank you.
washes out in those two numbers. The next slide is a screenshot from our tentative budget that was presented in May that showed that what we had budgeted for revenue and our expenses, we still had a variance of $366,000 left over in recurring money that we had not budgeted out at that point. So that was showing that we had that money available that we could use for our salary increase that we are discussing tonight. And based on this next school year, if we maintain our 62.2 cent rate, that's what the tentative budget was built on, is maintaining our current revenue that we functioned on this past fiscal year, and we continue to function on that same revenue source. We have this 366 plus how we ended the budget, because it is the district's opinion that's recurring dollars that we ended with. So those two numbers added together on the next slide show that we have approximately $714,000 of reoccurring dollars that we can use for our salary discussion tonight.
Are the recurring dollars only from the tax revenue or from all sources of revenue?
It's all sources of revenue except for the beginning balance and on behalf. So it would be tax dollars and federal and state dollars that are budgeted.
The budget numbers for May, it's always difficult to budget, certainly when you're in the middle of the year, but now that you've had the advantage of 20/20 hindsight, and 16-17 year is over, are you preparing any specific budget changes at this point in time that you identified of, this is what we thought the numbers would be, but now that we've had a chance to get this behind us, this is how we think we'll actually accomplish turning some of that into recurring for the future?
One item, since workers' comp had been over budgeted, that budget has been corrected. That was corrected in the tentative budget, which is partly why you had that 366 left over, because that was about $350,000. So that's already been corrected. And then as far as the major reoccurring expense, salaries and benefits, that's based on the staff at the point in May when we pulled them out, which is when we're considered really fully staffed. And we know that our staff level ebbs and flows through the year, so we're looking at the highest expenditures at that point of what staff is going to cost us. And when we have people retire and new teachers come in, that saves us some money too, which is why every year we end salaries with extra money in it, which we ended this year 1.2%, but that equates to about, between the salaries and benefits, about $344,000 is what we had left over with those two categories, which is why we're calling that reoccurring dollars, because that was really the bulk of where the money was left over at.
So at this point in time, there's no proposed line item changes to the
No, sir.
the budget we're currently working with.
So based on the proposal of what has been suggested as far as changing the starting salaries of bus drivers, custodians, instructional assistants, and bus monitors, that was going to cost approximately $73,000. That's on the next slide, please. And a 2% raise across the board on classified and certified staff. Again, at the point in time that we pulled that staffing level out at May, is $546,000 for a total raise to the salaries for $619,000. And as I said on the previous slide, we are considering that we have about $714,000 in recurring dollars.
Has any provision been made in the tentative budget? I do not recall this, regarding the significant increase in the amount of retirement benefits that employers must pay on our classified staff next year.
Are you referring to the article that came out that it could go up to
Yes.
26? No, ma'am. Not in the tentative budget, it is not. We have budgeted what the current rate is, the 19.18%. But we've not budgeted anything extra at this point.
So the 19.8 is
The
budgeted.
the 19.18%, which is the current rate that's started in January, is being budgeted for this whole next year. And I was in a meeting last Friday with several finance officers, and one of the finance officers, he's with Grant County, is also on the pension committee board, and who is in discussions with the governor about the rate going up to the 26 possible %, and he says he does not foresee that it would go up that much. The biggest change is that CERS is going to split off from KRS. It should go up a little bit, but not to what KSBA predicted in their article. Is his word of mouth. Right now, no one knows until it's carried on the floor what the actual proposal will be.
So that's not going to impact anything that's done here tonight.
It won't impact the current budget for the 17-18 school year. If that rate goes up, it will have to be a consideration for next year on our 18-19 budget. And tax rates at that point, it would have to be a factor. So that is my proposal and the dollar amounts of what raises will cost. Are there any questions for myself and Mr. Christie regarding our proposal?
Questions?
The proposal, there's several factors in the proposal. As a procedural matter, are we able to parse those into smaller bites so that we can discuss the certified rates and perhaps specific certified rates, and then have a subsequent discussion about overall tax rates?
Yeah, if you can do it in 44 minutes. I'm serious.
I think I can do it.
Start.
All righty. I guess just from an overall standpoint, we're in a difficult balancing act. I've met a lot of the teachers and administrators and touring through the school system and working with them for the last 6 months, and 95% plus of them are excellent people, and I'm really glad that we have them. And I want to do as much as possible for them so we can keep the good folks we have. But realistically, we're constrained by how much we could do in terms of what else is in the budget, other potential needs and desires we might have for initiatives in other areas, and then simply that we have to keep a balancing act of the tax rates. So one of the things I wanted to do was try to take a look at these individually and then look at the components. Let's start with bus drivers. The proposal for bus drivers, if I recall correctly, it's an increase to $14 an hour, and that affects the first how many years?
First 4 years.
First 4
Year 5,
years.
they catch back up to the schedule at 1407, I think.
And bus drivers, as I've given this a lot of thought, are certainly one of, I mean, it's hard to say who's the most critical employees that we have out there, because all of them are critical. But the fact that bus drivers are the only group of certified employees that are directly in charge of students on a daily basis, and that we know just by picking up any newspaper, not to withstand the Winchester Sun within the last 2 weeks, is the demand for bus drivers is very difficult. And one of the things I ran on is a 4-point platform, and one of them was safe schools, and that's integrated in that. And so that's the first thing that comes to my mind is looking at that and say, what's the best we could do to push that to get the safest drivers that might be available. And I'm certainly not implying we don't have safe drivers now. I think we've got a great staff, but we always want to push that to the extent that we can. So I took a look at the surrounding competing towns, counties of Estill, Bourbon, Powell, Montgomery, and I think we're in fairly good shape on a cost basis, on a pay basis with most of those. But Estill County really seemed to stand out. We're below Estill County, and so I prepared a proposal last Thursday that you were kind enough to run through the supercomputer and see what the cost of it was, and then also share that with the other board members as soon as that analysis was over or was complete. And the cost of if we changed our bus driver pay to match Estill County plus a penny, because we always want to do a little bit better, then that would cost approximately $73,000 in and of itself. So I'd like to throw that out for consideration for my fellow board members to evaluate. In terms of custodians and instructional assistants, again, looking back at where we are competitive from the other counties around us, I thought custodians probably didn't need to be moved up all the way to $12.31. $12 probably is more in line, but that might be nitpicking on that. And instructional assistants and bus monitors, I thought from a competitive standpoint, we're in a pretty good point. So I asked you to do the calculation, which you were again kind enough to do, and I shared it with the other members for those groups. I would propose that we match Estill County's rates for bus drivers, and for custodians, we increase the starting at $12 an hour instead of $12.31. We'll leave instructional assistants and bus monitors alone, and on cooks and bakers, we take those to $11 an hour. Which I think it's 6 cents more than what y'all are proposing.
Yes. We had proposed 1094.
So I'd like to propose to speed things along, that we take that component, and I'll just make that a motion that what I've just specified and what was communicated electronically, I'd like to propose that as a change in rates for those 4 certified groups for the 17-18 year.
Can you
And then whatever would be
repeat,
the appropriate way to go from there.
can you repeat the category and the beginning salary?
All right, bus drivers is grade CL 12. And would you like for me to read each of the proposed rates, which I'd be happy to do?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If I get any of these wrong, I'm going to blame my bifocals. So year number one would increase to $13.51 an hour.
Okay. Oh, so earlier, the $14 an hour is not what you're proposing?
That's correct. They were proposing a flat number for the first 3 or 4 years. What I'm proposing is looking at each single one of the years and changing
Okay.
each, making 30 different changes.
Okay.
So, first year, $13.51. Second year, $14.26. Third year, $14.41. And then the next year, $14.26. I guess that would be the fourth year. Fifth
Down
year,
from 1426 to 1441, down to 1426?
let me restate it again in case I misspoke on this. 1351 to 1426 to 1441 to 1456 to 1476 to 1491 to 1506 1526 1541 1556 $16.06 $16.21
Up to year 12.
Yeah, I'm trying to read my small numbers here, I apologize. So the next one should be 1636, and then 1651, then 1671, 1696, 1706, 1721, 1736, 1756, 1771, 1786, 1786, 1786, 1806, 1806, 1806, 1821, 1821, 1821, and 1841.
How many years did you take it out?
30 years.
Okay.
And
Because this
This
only
is-
went to
I
27.
was gonna say, on our schedule, it would be to 27 plus.
Right.
and I can live with that also. My concept was try to match the competition. And I can also, I'd be happy to just to cap it at the 1821.
And what is that cost?
For the bus driver
Or on
schedule,
his,
he
yes.
just proposed, and then the $12 flat rate for custodians, that costs $73,459.
How much just for the bus drivers?
I don't have that calculated separately. Hold on, let me find my
I
spreadsheet.
think it's,
Just the bus drivers
56,000.
was $56,328.
salaries and benefits.
Yes.
Okay, so far as this motion, we have a revised schedule, salary schedule for CO call for bus drivers. What else?
All right, the next one then is,
Do you want that to stand on its own, or do you want to add to that?
I'd be happy to let that stand on its own. We can move to the next one.
Okay. So motion by Mr. Heisel regarding salary increases as described on CO call. Is there a second? Second. Motion dies for lack of a second.
Okay. Given that, from a practical standpoint, I think I'll withdraw the other changes in because there'll be a waste of time, and as you would say, we're on the clock.
Okay. All right, further discussion.
should I move on to my opinion about certified, our overall rates? Okay. Sir, if you could pull up the salary comparison page that I gave to you. There's a printed copy I'd like to share, and this is a comparison of surrounding districts. So based upon information that's published on KDE's site, what I wanted to try to determine is how do we compare to surrounding districts. So the counties that touch us, I'm calling those adjacent counties, and the ones outside that touch those counties, I'm calling second adjacent counties. Now, we've got to address the elephant in the room right at the beginning. Fayette County is obviously an adjacent county to us, but realistically, they have a 75-cent tax rate that's 20% higher than ours. It's higher than everyone else's around, and they have a half-cent payroll tax. And in terms of comparison, I've excluded them from my comparisons at this point in time because in many cases they're going to be difficult to attain. So I just want to go ahead and state that. So what I've tried to do is evaluate who has the maximum salary of non-Fayette districts. And this is broken down into rank 3, rank 2, and rank 1. In the green block is who has the maximum salary, and then I'm listed over on the left what counties have the maximum salary. So I've gone through this for rank 3, and then the next page, sir, is rank 2. You see we do very well there in years 8 through 19, and then rank 1. And now,
These are 16, 17 schedules,
yes, sir.
so it doesn't reflect the raises that these counties have given at this time.
If they've given raises since last year, it would not reflect that. Yes, sir, that is correct. And I'm not aware of.
Madison County gave 1.5.
Okay. Then it does not reflect that.
How much, Gordy?
1.5.
On the fourth page, the fourth and final page, I then did a count of, there's 93 different data points on there, and 47% of the time, excepting whatever changes might have occurred since last year, we have the highest non-Fayette County pay. Scott County comes in next, and Jessamine and Estill County. And that next grouping is just a very basic average pay. We have, of that group, the highest average pay at $52,123, and Madison County is there in the middle of the pack, and if they went up 1%, so that would add them, take them up to $51,000, still puts them below us on an average basis. So I would certainly like to be able to do more, but I think we're reasonably in line with our surrounding counties except for Fayette. Realistically, the other problem that we're constrained with is how much we can increase tax rates. Now, this is certainly not a tax rate hearing, but it impacts what sort of latitude that we have of be able to sustain future increases. Again, looking at our county and then the surrounding counties, this time I put Fayette County on there. They're at 75 cents a thousand. Jessamine is at 68, but we're number 3 out of that group. We're the third highest, and we're higher than everybody else around us except for those 2 counties. So we're fighting this balancing act of certainly wanting to do more for our staff, but we know if we realistically push the tax rate too much now or in the future, that might have the negative impact of reducing our potential number of families that either choose to stay in Clark County or move to Clark County. So in conclusion, I would certainly like to be able to do more for the staff. They deserve it, but I feel we're boxed in, especially when taking into consideration the unknowns of what might happen with pension rates, which that's also been well covered in the newspaper, and what might happen with the overall state budget. Governor Besman has talked about having a special session for that, and have no idea what impact that might have on seat rates. So we're boxed in, and I think we're at a point where we have to try to, from my standpoint, strike a balance between all those competing concerns.
further discussion?
I don't think we can go in and start picking bus drivers, custodians, and giving them a raise in this. I think we're gonna open ourselves up more than I want to be.
Okay, further discussion? 6, Senator Peace before.
I certainly appreciate, Alicia, what you've done. As you know, I have asked for a look at raises. Have either been voted down or didn't get a second, either one on that. And to kind of address Ms. Hicks, I do certainly understand when we have voted on a salary schedule and what discussion happens after that, or if we should have discussion after that. But I think the most important thing, just for me, and I know everybody comes to be a politician or whatever we want to call ourselves, you know, to what you think you can have the most effect on your community. And I think teacher pay, getting the best people in, is the one thing that we can have the most effect on. We can do policies, we can do goals, we can do everything else, but the teacher in the classroom is the most effective thing for instruction. And to compare it a little bit, Ms. Hicks, it would be similar to the way I would look at it. Would be if Ms. Considine came in the middle of the year and asked for an instructional program, and we had the money to do the instructional program, we would probably give that to them to help improve instruction. We did set a salary schedule. We do have money to be able to improve instruction, getting the people in. I think therefore we should go with the proposal that Alicia has here.
I was saying, thank you.
And if need be, I'll make that in the form of a motion.
Okay, so you want to adopt you're making a motion to adopt the
Proposal.
proposal that Ms. Ellis
That's been
pretty much
presented to us.
2% increase across the
It's a
board.
2% across the board, and it's the raise of bus drivers to $14 an hour, years 1 through 4, custodians $12.31, years 1 through 4, instructional assistants and bus monitors to $10.76, years 1 through 6, cooks and bakers to $10.94, years 1 through 6.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, sir.
Is that additive, so a bus driver is moved to $14 an hour, is the 2% then moving on top of that, so at the end of that, the result is $14.28, or does the 14 come after that?
The 14 comes after that. It's $14 year, we're doing 2% across the board, but it's years 1 through 4 would be $14.
So it's not 14 plus 2%.
No.
So the 2% does not go back to that. I think I may have
Let me look
misunderstood
at
you
my
before.
2% schedule, hold on just a moment.
We calculated the $14 an hour, and then we did 2% of the total.
Let me look, 2%.
Because I was wondering whether it needed to be 2 motions or 1 motion. So,
Okay, currently, I apologize, currently, the $14 is not on the schedule that I listed as the 2% overall. So it's 2% overall first is what has been proposed.
okay.
And then, so that would be a decision on your part whether we do $14 with 2% on top of that, but the schedule that was presented tonight does not include the 14 flat rate that we discussed.
So the $14 was based on the 16-17 schedule?
Correct.
That's where that was?
Yes.
Okay. Then a 2% was added, or
We
the
can-
2% was added first?
2% was added first, and then we just changed those positions to
So
the
then
flat
we would
rate.
probably have to have 2 motions, Dr. Kudak, do you think we would
It's up
have?
to you.
I mean, well, I'm just saying that, I just want to make sure we get it right there, that.
And I would have to correct the classified schedule. So right now, that is the decision that you all can make. Because the classified schedule does not have the flat rate increases on it that I proposed, 2% increase. It says 2% overall. I just looked
Mr.
at
Elkins,
it.
do you have any
It
opinion
was
whether that
taking
should
straight
be?
from the 16, 17.
Should we have
and
a
2%
motion on the
off.
2% first and then a motion? Or can we just accept the whole package and I just don't want it to come back?
The cost of 2%, let me tell you, is not very much though, obviously.
Right.
I think we're trying to avoid $14 plus 2%. If you get the 2% across the board first, that's going to leave the positions that she's isolated below $14 an hour, and then you raise them on up to $14 an hour.
And that's where the 76,
You won't have that
73,000.
14 problem.
Even if we
2%.
raise it to the 14 first and then add 2%, you're talking $1,400 for 2% on $73,000. So it's not an astronomical amount of money that our budget can't sustain.
well, I'll make the motion that we do a 2% across the board raise for all employees.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Rich. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
No.
And no also, so that motion fails 2-3 with Ms. Reparo, Ms. Ritchie in favor, Mr. Faisal, and Judy Spice.
Could I ask a procedural question?
Sure.
I know I've asked for a 2% raise or a raise for employees, and it's been turned down. Why did we have this meeting? I mean, who won? I didn't ask for this meeting. Did you ask for the meeting? Ms.?
Well, actually.
Actually, you
You
did.
did.
No, I asked for the next meeting that we came to
I
there.
can tell you how we got to this point. It was asked to be put on the regular agenda of the August meeting. However, if we waited to have this discussion on August the 15th and this had passed, that meant that the payroll department was going to have to go through 900 additional employees, one by one, and calculate the raises based out over the remainder of the year. So this was, if we got this set aside before August the 5th, it's a matter of pushing some buttons and making it across the board.
I know that I wanted the discussion because I wanted the board to be able to see the same things that I saw in March, that we had the money to do the raise. As the same saw in July, which we now saw at the end of the budget, which we now see again in September when our audited version comes through. But, I thought to call a special meeting that that the chairperson would do that, or it had to take a vote across. I just felt like that we just wasted our time if nobody wanted to do this, because I certainly didn't ask for it. It was a surprise to me when it came up.
Well, that was the reason, was I wanted to, if this salary increase was going to pass, it would be passed tonight. So there was times of the absence there. It would have been and it was my intention to do the salary increase the same time as the tax rate, because the two items were somewhat linked. If you raise taxes, then you have more recurring revenue, and your budget is better able to sort of cut that salary, and that's especially now.
I do feel like that we need to, in the future, since Ms. Ellis does a great job with giving us quarterly reports, that at the end of the third quarter report, that our superintendent study that report, reflect on what we feel like we may be in the budget-wise, make a recommendation at that time that he feels like that we could do a raise or we could not do a raise, and what his reasoning behind that. I think, I can sit and look at that budget, and I look at it every time we get one. It was very apparent that our people could have a raise, and we have not given it to them.
And I'd be willing to revisit number one, I don't think tonight was a waste of time. I think things about our budget, these are things about our tax rate, where we see bonus. My issue here is I don't think we can sustain 2%. If somebody could go something lower, I'm not entertaining that, but I don't think we can sustain 2%. That's really close to what our code. I think there's peril there, because we're assuming the CPACE is going to stay the same, we're assuming the population of the district is going to stay the same. Neither of those are particularly safe assumptions.
Listen, right now, with the contingency we have, we can be 100% wrong on this raise and pay for it out of contingency for over 20 years.
Well, I'd like to take another bite at the apple on this and return to your proposal. Since my proposal didn't get a second, we'll try this again. you proposed bus drivers to take them from $12.74 to $14 an hour with a catch-up in year 5. I'd like to propose that particular increase as a motion.
Can you restate that?
The motion is to increase the starting rate of bus drivers to $14 an hour with a catch-up in year 5, as has been proposed on that line item by staff. The estimated cost of that one change is $20,223.64.
All right, so that's a motion. Is there a second on that?
I'll second that.
Other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, so that'll pass 3-2 with Dr. Kudak, Mr. Heisel is Ritchie in favor, and Ms. Hicks, and Mr. Farrow opposed. All right, and salary increase for bus driver.
Now I'll redirect and open up for additional comments for our superintendent. Of the other 3 categories on here, custodians, instructional assistants, and cooks and bakers, and certainly Mrs. Ryan, if you want to jump in terms of
I don't.
recruiting and retention, what's the next category that we have the most difficulty is? Because in the real world, that's what we've got to look at. I'd love to pay everybody $100,000 a year, but we can't do it.
Last year, we lost 13 custodians. We've lost 15 instructional assistants. I'm sorry, 15, yeah. 15 instructional assistants.
And just a side note, the cooks and bakers is off of Fund 51, which Ms. Lowry can support out of her budget.
That was the part for the cooks and bakers was that would be paid out of the food services. That was not going to affect the budget, and they can certainly sustain that.
Because that's not part of general fund, and historically, it looks like they've been doing well with their money, even with the change that's occurring for this next year in terms of no cost for food.
Yes.
After the first year, we had our best year in food services ever last
Okay.
year.
Well, let me take a bite at that. I'd like to make a motion that for cooks and bakers, we increase the current starting rate from $9.68 an hour to $10.94 an hour with a catch-up in year 7. And this will be paid for not out of the general fund, but out of the food service fund with estimated costs of $26,928.65.
All right, I think I have all that. Motion by Mr. Heisel, is there a second? No second. Okay, any other motions, discussion? Okay. All right. One motion to increase the pay of bus drivers and nothing else. Any other discussion on this topic?
Yes, which I would like to clarify, because I know at one point I said that I would not pick and choose out of things. We have discussed all along raising the bus drivers up from over the last year and a half. At one time, we were going to give them $1 more on the hour when we were short bus drivers. When was that, last year or the year before?
Mm-hmm.
So that is why I'm not picking and choosing, but we have discussed this many times.
I'll throw something else out. We're discussing salary raises, and there has been a request from parents and community members, a lot of other people, to have more bus monitors on buses. We have all this extra money for salaries, it's possible to hire more bus monitors. I would just ask that. Something that bus drivers have made that comment, parents have made that comment, community members have made that comment. I'm hearing that from those. So, that's-
Bus drivers have made that comment.
Yes, that is.
I don't think I've worded this, we have all that extra money, since we apparently don't feel like we have that money. So since we have a little bit of extra money,
Right.
maybe we should do that.
But I'm not going to make a motion or anything like that, that would just be this.
And along those same lines, an idea I kicked around with the superintendent before is to do a trial, perhaps 1 or 2 buses, to see if it's possible to implement a live camera feed from a bus. And so in this scenario where we're not able to staff the bus with a bus monitor? Can we have cameras perhaps at the front and the back of the bus? There's a button on there by the bus driver. If there's an incident comes up, he or she would push that button, would be immediately
We can
connected.
be on our special meeting here with us.
Yeah, just giving an alternative to
Okay.
what you just talked
I
about.
understand, but let's keep going.
Because that could be done from contingency money, because it's one-time purchase.
Okay. All right, any other discussion on salary increases?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we do a 1% across the board raise.
Is there a second?
Do we have any numbers on 1%?
It's approximately $273,000, which could be sustained in the $366,000 that's left over in the tentative budget that was approved in May.
All right, motion's on the table by Mr. Farrell. Is there a second? Your second. Okay. All right, I think we're done with this. Any other discussion? All right, it's episode number 3, and I'll keep this brief. I'll keep this at 15 minutes or less. It's policy .145 instead of time limits for discussion of board agenda items. I think this was a good example, this discussion that we just had. Data coming out 6 days ago. Revised data came out a couple days before that. A couple other things came out yesterday and today. The 6 noted that she was at work working on something. I was at the hospital late last night, I worked early this morning. I didn't really have time to review it thoroughly. That probably played a role in the way I voted. We didn't really have time to go these things over. And over the past year or so, I would say this board's made a habit of getting information late, getting different information, getting key pieces of information a day or two before the meeting, sometimes the day of the meeting. And I think that is just leading us to make some decisions which may not be based on good data, to be honest with you. The copier is the thing that comes to mind most. Okay? Those are complicated things. We were given a couple things right at the last minute and expected to make a good decision. And I think I made a good decision based on what it's going to cost the district, but I didn't consider the cost of paper, and I didn't consider the cost of copies we made. And I didn't consider whether one of those leases would cost us less in the long run by being more expensive and making people like those copies. I didn't have time to think that through. I thought that through 3 weeks after. And I wish I had that data yet. So, our board policy 145 basically says that any board member, any member of the public, any member of the cabinet can bring something to the board for approval. And the deadline is 6 days before. And I think we're pretty good about setting agenda items and putting agenda items on 6 days before. We're not good about putting supporting documentation. The best way to approach something like this, we were discussing salaries. Salary table should have been sent out 2 weeks ago. And if people had changes and comments, percolated that around, sent that through, come up with something final to say. Ms. Ellis should get up and say, here is what we're going to go over, yes or no. Not pull it apart, piecemeal, like all that sort of stuff. That's a procedural thing, and that's something that's going to be between myself and Mr. Christie. I'd like to try to make sure that we are getting all of our data out as far ahead of time as possible.
On that note, I would disagree on this agenda item that we had tonight because we get a budget every month. And sometimes we don't need to rely on Ms. Ellis to tell us that we've got plenty of money. We should be looking all the time to know that we have plenty of money. Now, some things I can't agree with y'all, but in a situation like this, we should know our budget back and forth. We should know coming at the end of the year that we have the money. That should be a responsibility of every board member that we have here. What she said tonight was the same thing that I talked to Dr. Bob about 4 months ago. And I think you would find that the person that we hire as an expert to do our budget would agree that we could give a raise to our staff. So I disagree on this, but I do agree with you on some other things.
And with that being said, we also do not know what type of emails they are getting.
Right.
If she's being given 50 emails she's trying to dissect through to get something to present to us, it is going to take her to the last minute because she's trying to answer all the questions. And she has a new baby.
It's going
And
to
other
change on the
priorities.
Procedural thing, that if you're saying 6 days, I'll convey to my cabinet, in the cabinet meeting tomorrow, I will take no more information, and if there's supporting documentation that comes in after the fact, I'll ask it to be removed from the agenda.
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank
I've
you.
tried to be flexible
It's-
about it,
it's-
because I know
and I
that
would
there's
say
some
that
things that need to be done so
the
the system
staff,
can operate.
you know, with all the, and we'll just convey it to construction people, everybody involved, but that comes from here too, because I get I got emails today about information presented tonight
What-
from board members, so it's gotta be all the way around
I
this
agree.
this
I
room.
fully agree.
You know,
Well-
I will hold my staff to it.
Just a daggum second here, we have a policy in front of us, so 145, and it specifies the timeframe when agenda items need to be put on there. Does it specify when supporting documentation needs to be included?
No, perhaps we can end it.
Has, well, and I think before you jump to the conclusion that the entire board has just instituted a policy of 6 days ahead of time, I'm not sure the entire board has agreed to that. I would admit that Dr. Kudak has suggested that, in his opinion, for us to have the most effectiveness, that's a reasonable time frame, and as we get shorter and closer to the date, the probability of that being effective goes down and down. But there's certainly, it's the prerogative of the board to make that change, I would say, if we want to change our policy. But at this point in time, I don't think we can imply that we've instituted any policy about that, unless there's policy out there I'm not aware of.
The other thing that bothers me is this is about public notice and making sure that we're doing transparent and consistent with the public. Okay? A lot of this stuff goes back and forth, and there's corrections to things and all that sort of stuff. That's not showing up in the board back to the public yet. Okay? I want the public's opinion. I want to hear what the public has to say. Okay? There's something on there that we haven't done a lot of controversial stuff, but we're actually pretty good. But I missed a meeting where we had lots of speakers. So. But when something comes up that the public is interested in, they'll come here and they will make their voice heard. I will listen to them. That's what we're here for. And if we don't give adequate public notice in terms of, here's the agenda, here's what we're going to talk about at this meeting, here are the documents we are going to discuss at this meeting. We're not going to pull any surprises or have any hidden stuff. It's all out here. You tell us what you think. We'll do the best we can to make the best decision for the community and the schools.
Could I-
When you start circulating things ahead of time and only certain people get it and all that and add stuff, it destroys that. I think it destroys our credibility.
Well, I suggest then, as if there's additional documents that come in within that 6 to 0 day time frame, that information, to the extent possible, be posted on.
I think the deadline for supporting documentation should be 6 days in advance. If we need to make board agenda a deadline further ahead than that, I think we should do that. So we should have that. I think
we'll have to clarify what
I
a
think you all should
supporting
understand where their
document,
confusion's coming in from this topic right here, right now.
Yeah.
like what a supporting document would be. I mean, again, I don't get the agenda until Thursday. I don't see what's on it or whatever. So at the point that I get it, I may have to make phone calls here and there. You talk about me bringing in something that I can no longer put that on. I'm not going to put it on the agenda. I'm just saying that it's my supporting document for what's being discussed. There's no way, I mean, you're going to have to talk about, you're going to have to get agenda items a month before. I mean, I don't think that you can tell a board member that we can't go out and do our research. I'm not saying you, I'm not saying that, I'm saying the policy cannot say that, cannot say that, if something comes up on the agenda and it involves Mr. Nichols, and I'm going to call him and say, what can you tell me about this? What I need to know? What are the pros? What are the cons? Or something like that. And I'm going to get that, on Friday, Monday, or something like that. That it may come back from him, and I bring that in. I don't look at that as being a.
No, I think that's fine. That's
what I'm
part of your
what I'm
research,
not
and that
clear on
contributes
is
to the
what,
discussion.
even.
I'm saying something is presented to us, it goes out in board documentation, and we're given something the night of the meeting or the day before and say, hey, look at this instead.
So you're talking about what actually comes from the agenda. Like, well, let's just take, for example, tonight, Mr. Heisel brought in a proposal. You're not talking about his proposal.
Oh, yeah, that would be. I think that.
I mean, I just think his is
I
I think what he did tonight was a reflection of what he saw.
Right.
And I don't think that we could tell a board member that they could not bring.
Well, another good example was the pay app from PSI at the last meeting. We were missing documentation. It was handed to us that night. We had to make a decision right there on that.
Yeah. Now, I understand some of those.
That's an issue. That should not happen.
And the request for data, that last Thursday is when I made that, and certainly it takes time to do it. So I tried to be as timely as possible.
Okay.
So at this point in time, is there any official change in our policy?
What's Is there an official, what do I accept and what do I take as, and do I distribute to other board members?
I thought at one point, we had discussed that when the agenda items are posted and we have questions about it that we send to the superintendent, that email would be distributed to all board members by the superintendent. I'm not sure that is happening.
I'm gonna try, I try, but when I get 50 emails a day, today I spent 6 hours on emails, right?
Which is taking away
Just
from
here,
stuff that you
just
need to
here,
be
just
doing
board,
within the
just around
district.
this table, answering questions and things, and I don't, and
I was doing that when I was supposed to be working with that.
And I-
So that's not fair.
you know, they
I was
start for
doing that
me at
yesterday when I
midnight
was
on
supposed to
Sunday
work.
night. And I'll just tell you right now that you're probably not gonna get any responses from me until Monday morning. And when they start coming in at 10, 11 o'clock on Sunday night, I'm probably not gonna respond to them on Sunday night. But, you know, I'll continue to try to make every email, but every email that comes to me, if that's what you're asking, that I forward that back out. If I give you a response, I send it out to everybody. I'll continue to try to do that. I try to do that, but I get caught up sometimes in these little quick ones that I can answer quickly. That's a very specific question that maybe the others might not have. I try to send those quickly and get on them as quick as I can without having to go through and copy everybody on it. You know, starting with the Friday before a board meeting, it's pretty much 3 days of answering questions, because once I send that question out to everybody, that question, or my answer, that generates 4 more from everybody else that may or may not be related to what went out. So we just start a chain, and I get, it's extremely difficult not to get lost in the chain of emails as they're coming in from everybody.
I think your staff is getting lost in these emails. I think that we have all kinds of stuff that Alicia needs to be doing, and she's answering 50 emails a day to be micromanaged, and then we don't even vote to do anything with it. She has wasted her time.
But
We are a board. We are not her boss. We do not need to come in here and micromanage everything that she does, everything Scarlett does, or anything else. And it is getting out of hand.
I just want clear direction on if somebody sends something in and it's going to be presented at the board meeting. You all want me to forward that out to you? I mean, like Scott's stuff, it was right on target with what we were proposing. It was just a little different take.
Yeah, but I mean, the first set of
But if
items
that
that went out with the
if
packet,
that comes in
fine.
like that, you know, we didn't get the computations done on that until Monday. You know, and then when it goes back, I mean, it's not an automatic, it's not a going there and an easy button that she pushes to do this. It takes a lot of time for several people to do these things. When we get them, it takes them. Do you want me to send that out? I mean, if it's the day of the board meeting, then what's my direction? Do I send that out to you, or am I going to get
If it's the day of the board meeting, I cannot review it prior
But
to.
if it doesn't come in until, and we can't get an answer to it.
Then we
until that
postpone
day.
it to the next meeting.
We don't know about
That's all I
information.
know.
I don't know that I can agree with that, because I think what Mr. Heisel did was his response to the agenda item.
Right.
Ms. Ellis put hers in plenty of time. That's just his response to it. I think it was more of a courtesy to try to get it. If you can see it, you can see it. If not, he's going to talk about it here, because that's his response to it. So I don't think that we could say to Mr. Heisel, no, you can't come up with your ideals at the meeting because you didn't let everybody know about it. That's just a response. I think what we have to have is Alicia's presentation. If she didn't have it ready until Monday, then no, we couldn't do this meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
and I have no issue
But
with you did
but
because
the
it was
response that we
6
have
days
back,
ago, I
I mean,
analyzed it, so.
That takes
That was
time.
my point on this whole thing. I feel like with it being Alicia's thing tonight, we're kind of directing it towards Alicia right now in this whole
I don't have a
conversation.
problem with that. You did things correctly. It's when we start to change. Okay, let's take what you have and then let's make 6 different things from that. And let's vote on all those 6 different things. By the way, you're going to get 2 or 3 of these to one. I can't vote intelligently.
But the documents that are posted to the OneDrive or, to our site where we access documents, presumably, those are the result of what the superintendent is going to be recommending.
Right.
So, that's what we need to see.
I don't formally ask Paul for his recommendation, but I know what it is.
Right.
because the
If it's
agenda
on,
items-
if it's on the agenda, Presumably, that's his recommendation. Okay, so those related documents, yes, that's what we need to see. Our response to it, maybe not. But if, you know, if we have questions about it that could shed light on some topic that might be useful to other members, that's what I'm looking for. You know, if Scott has a question that I don't have, you know, how do I know that? Unless somebody sends that back. You know, I don't necessarily need to see his document or have it, you know, wherever it's going. It's the documents that relate to the agenda items prepared by the superintendent and his staff. Those are the ones that I think have to be there in the timely manner.
Okay, so then when people start altering it and she's having to send out more, and I'm not talking, I know this looks like now I'm talking about Scott. It's not just Scott, it's everything.
No, this happens a lot.
He didn't
Right.
alter her document, he just presented
He
his own.
created his own.
Right, and that's fine, but then if Alicia's having to go back and bounce numbers off of that, and then, so you're wanting copies of all that as well?
I'm saying that, no, not necessarily of new documents unless the original documents that are posted by staff are incorrect.
Okay.
But I think what you said is, to the extent possible, as long as we're just simply sharing information, if we ask you a question and you respond with information, if it's possible, if you could copy everybody, and I guess a way that we could lead that is when we ask you a question, we could copy everyone on the board. And as long as we keep it in the arena of just simply information, then when you respond, it'll automatically go to everybody. And that way we could constrain ourselves to make sure that's we're not implying any discussion or anything like that. And if it comes in 5 minutes before, well, it's not going to be particularly pertinent. And you can only do the best that you can do. And I think you've got the job that everybody's got jobs to do. So we can only do the best that we can do. Is that a reasonable, what about that approach? Does that seem helpful?
I think it reaches just a little too far.
Yeah.
I think it's you can disseminate information, but if you get into asking questions and everybody's in the room, even digitally,
Yeah.
I think it becomes
That's a meeting.
more in the form of work than it does information.
Well, that's why I try to constrain it to simply an exchange of information, but your point's well taken.
So what I try to do is, you know, and maybe it seems awkward, it certainly feels awkward to me, I may disseminate information to 2 of you in this group, 3 of you in this other group, because literally that's what the rule says, that in smaller groups than a quorum, you know, we can have meetings for purposes of disseminating information, but no work's to be done. So, you know, it leaves open the question, can we do that in groups of 5 or 6? I'm not so sure that we can, but we are authorized to do it in smaller groups. So that's why, you know, and I'm not, gosh, you have to ask yourself, will there be anything made of it if I put, you know, this person in this group or that person in that group? Well, I'm just trying to make sure we're not doing it in a full group when we share information.
All right, I also mentioned time limits here, and there's 2 minutes of time left on this discussion item, so I'm going to take it. I am going to, starting with the August agenda, set time limits for discussion on each agenda item. I'm going to make a guess as to how much time we're going to spend on each item. The state board does this. The state board can get a really, really big agenda in one day, and I'm going to set time limits on. But if anybody disagrees with those time limits at the beginning, they can feel free to amend the agenda. But I think this board does a lot of spinning its wheels, and just, we have had nights where we've had 15, 16 items on the agenda. Things are straightforward.
I want to make sure I understand.
I don't think that's right.
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that with our policies, you had the ability to do that, or the Robert's Rules of Order? Or
Robert's Rules of Order, I have the ability to do that. So, and if there is I have a minute left on this, so if we hit the time limit, I'll ask for a motion, a second, close debate, and that's it. And if
So
the thing
what
is
if-
not decided, we'll put it on the next agenda.
And so I think the first place that the question and answer comes up, Mr. Heisel, will be whenever we try to make our motion to adopt the agenda. I mean, and as Dr. Kuda has suggested, if somebody thinks there's some unreasonable limit there, they can speak to it at that point.
Right.
So you're proposing that within the agenda, or at the beginning, you state we're going to take this much, this
When that
amount.
agenda comes out, it's going to have times next to it.
Okay,
I
so
think
what
it's
if
gonna-
Judy talks, we got 30 minutes and Judy talks for 29, I'm just left with not being able to say
I'll
anything?
try to make sure that there's time.
Just wondering.
All right. Time is up for debate on that. Motion is
Send
to
your request to
adjourn.
address the board, so you don't.
I'll make a motion.
So you're
Motion
trying
to
to
adjourn, second.
What do we,
We're motioning to adjourn.
oh, second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Board's adjourned at 7:15 p.m.
What was it, 7:15?